Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us in today's session. We'd like to welcome you. We'd like to welcome Ash for joining us as well. Just to introduce myself, my name is Sean, and I work with Ash to be able to host this session with you guys. Ash will be the one mostly driving the show, but this session itself, it's actually designed for anyone, right? Whether you're a seasoned RPA developer, whether you're a business analyst, you're beginning your automation journey, uh, or you've done RPA for a long time, you've used UiPath and trying to master the solution as well. We're actually here to give you some updates about the solution and how we're able to help dive into the advanced techniques about orchestration strategies and how we can leverage UiPath to solve complex business challenges and for you to be able to have like more meaningful outcomes with your automated solution. Just a quick background about the past few weeks. We started slowly built the way to be able to actually have this session on UiPath Maestro itself. So we had a few sessions on autopilot for everyone. We had a session on prompt engineering, and last week we had a session on UiPath agents, where Ash actually ran us through the Agentic solution itself, where you talk about what you will be needing to be able to build the agent itself. And here we are now. We're going to talk about UiPath Maestro. We're going to talk about BPMN, and eventually how we're able to connect the dots between agents, automation, and by the end of this webinar, we're expecting you to be able to walk away with insights, tools, understand some of the best practices for you to be able to elevate your automation solutions and maybe be inspired with the next idea for your organization or for your customers itself. And having said that, I'd like to introduce Ash Kulkarni. Ash has been recognized as a UiPath community MVP and is a very much influential a member in the UiPath community as well. So Ash, once again, thank you so much for joining and hosting this session for us. And I'll pass the floor to you. And from my side, if there are some questions, please feel free to raise it in the chat. I'm happy to answer questions in the chat as well while Ash is actually speaking. And then, let's make it interactive. We've enabled the microphones for you as well. By default, you're muted currently, but if you have some questions, please type it in the chat, and then we'll have some room for Q&A as well in this session as well.
Thank you, Sean. Just to add to what Sean said, we are really excited to be doing this for the UiPath community. I know it's a Melbourne chapter event, but I see that we have participation from various cities, and that's really good to see. I will just say at the start that I'm not really big on slides, just like Sean also said, he just has one slide. So we'll spend some time on slides, but more time on actually doing the thing, because that's how I like to do things, learn things, and teach things. So let's get started. I'll share my screen, and I'll start with a recap of what we discussed last week. So anyone who's after attending the last week's session, you might remember this diagram, which was just basically something I put together in Excel, which depicts like a typical invoice process workflow. So you've got your dispatcher, which is typically a UiPath unattended process that extracts invoice, and then there's an OCR solution in the background. It could be UiPath document understanding. Depending on what technology you're using for OCR, it could be something else like Abby or anything. But that's typically the second piece of the puzzle. And then business rule engine, which is something like on the data that was extracted from the OCR, what are you doing in that business to make sure that the data that is extracted is accurately interpreted? So there may be some specific requirements for that customer or for that project where you must treat some data as something else, because the values are not always the same, mapped the same way. Something that says on invoice one way could be interpreted some other way in the target application like SAP or any other CRM that you're using, for example. So those things can be handled here. So that this is typically another UiPath process, unattended process. Now UiPath also have launched something called business rules, which is basically like an if then else engine that you can just create business rules within Orchestrator. But that's not the topic of this session, so I'll just skip that. The point I'm trying to make here is if you look at any process, like Invoice is a very popular one. Accounts payable, it's very popular. That's why I'm using that as an example. But any process that you implement traditionally in UiPath, there will be multiple processes involved, and there will be handshake through queue items. For example, one dispatcher creates queue items, which is creating work for performer, and then you can run one or multiple instances of your performer process, like the business rule engine or even data entry as the last step. So those performer bots can then go and finish the work that was created in queue. How do you track their collective performance? How do you track their collective any collective intelligence that you can derive from what dispatcher did and what performer did? It's not immediately obvious if you look at Orchestrator, because in Orchestrator, what you will see is one dispatcher job ran this morning, 5 performer jobs ran the rest of the day. They kept processing whatever dispatcher created for that morning. That's just an example of how typically things work in practice, right? So the only true indication whether those robots did their job right is you can look at queues and you can say at the end of the day there were 1,000 transactions created, 600 of which were successful, 300 business rule exceptions, and 100 were manual review or something like that. So that's the only thing you can really do at the end of the day. There's no clear dashboard that will show you something like what is this automation solution, the overall project that you're trying to manage, how is it going. You will have to build some kind of Power BI dashboard or use maybe even some of the UiPath tools to build an app and project those dashboards by storing that data somewhere like an external database. And all of these things are quite challenging, and it also makes the overall effort quite complicated. So all of that to say that there is something that that has been introduced by UiPath now, which is UiPath Maestro, which is what we are here to talk about today. And with the added complexity of using agents in your existing solutions, it becomes even trickier how you could manage a project like that with external dependencies, like I just described. So in a nutshell, UiPath Maestro makes a lot of these things much easier. Also, it's like a one-stop shop to maintain or to monitor all of these things. So I will just bring one slide up here for you all to see how agentic orchestration works across the end-to-end process lifecycle. Is you can model meaning the design the process. You can implement it using several different tools, as we will see. Operate, monitor, and optimize. So all of the things that I just mentioned, where you not only you can't see how the performance is going because you have to rely on a lot of external dependencies, and also how do you optimize it? Where do you optimize it? So you'll have to do a lot of extra work to find out where are the bottlenecks, for example. So all of these things are made easier by agentic orchestration. So we will start we'll start actually talking about the concept, but I just wanted to show you this slide to basically highlight what we are talking about in short. Now, let me open up another slide. So I know we are not really in a show of hands kind of environment, but anyone who has used BPMN or DMN before, they might want to say something in the chat. I will keep going, but BPMN, it stands for Business Process model notation. It's a universally accepted notation. For example, we see some symbols and we will know that they intrinsically mean one thing or another. So rather than just try to talk about it, I'll bring it up on screen. The BPMN business process model and notation is an internationally accepted notation. If you want to access this PDF, you can access it here, bpmdb.de/poster. So that's a quick way to access that. But let's just start with this. Sorry. So BPMN is basically an easy way to map a process out. So you can use all of these different components. So there are activities, conversations, choreographies, events. There's something called gateways, data and swim lanes. All of these things, they have. So I know this is a little overwhelming of an image, but try not to look at all the images at once. What we're trying to just break down here is that all of these components, they come together to make a collaboration diagram, which is basically your process map. So anytime we start a project, we have to map the process first, and there are different ways of doing it. For example, some of you who come from, say, a computer engineering background are familiar with UML, the Unified Modeling Language. That used to be big back in the day. So if you put a parallelogram, it's always like variable declaration. If it's an oval, it's always the start of the process. Similar to that, BPMN is its own notation, and a lot of teams, a lot of companies worldwide use that as their standard notation for mapping their processes. Similarly, DMN is decision model and notation. So most of the things that to do with decision making and how the process should go from one step to another, that's also a standard notation used worldwide. So BPMN, DMN, these two things make process mapping easier and easily understandable across teams, across organizations. That's mainly the purpose of existence for BPMN. I will now move on to the next point. So I hope BPMN and DMN are clear. If not, please post in chat if you have any questions. We can visit that shortly if there are any questions. So if you would like to read more, you can go to that link, as I said. And this is important because UiPath Maestro is a tool that uses exactly this notation. So Maestro is not a BPMN tool. I have seen a lot of YouTube videos and tutorials where the viewer might get the sense that this is what we do in Maestro, but that this is not what we do in Maestro. Maestro is a tool that utilizes this existing framework, but it does much more than that, and that we will see now. Now, before I get into Maestro, I'll quickly go show you this interface as well. So if you, some of you or all of you, if you're familiar with BPMN, you've probably mapped your own processes, and you will be familiar with tools like Lucidchart, or even Microsoft Visio, for example. So in Lucidchart is an online free process mapping tool, and you can see that even Lucidchart offers a BPMN and other process mapping notations like that. So let me quickly sign in just to show what we can do. Now, I have a free account. If you want to map your own process and you currently don't have any other tool like a Microsoft Visio license, what you can do is just you can go create from template, and BPMN happens to be one of the templates that you can use. And it what you can do with that is you can usually see all of the things that we just saw in this poster. You can use those in Lucidchart, and map your own process. So that is that. So that is all that I have to say about BPMN. BPMN.uipath.com is a URL that UiPath have set up to basically enable you to do the exact same thing. What you can do in Lucidchart, you can also do here, right? So let's say I'll just open one of the processes that I previously mapped, or let's say new BPMN. It just gives me a blank slate. Now I'm showing you this to highlight how all of these symbols, as you can see here, the tasks and your events. So all of these, they are available here as is. So if you compare these names, exclusive gateway, you will find exclusive gateway somewhere here. So there's exclusive gateways with blank and with the X symbol, so that you can see here. Now that's basically like a decision flow gateway. So the why this is important is if you start using Maestro, or if you start using process modeling using this interface, you can just refer to this diagram and know how you should map the process. So each of these symbols has meaning, and what is the detailed meaning of that, you can go and read there more about it. So this is why that diagram is really, really important. When I'm mapping Maestro processes, I constantly refer to this. So save that link. And now, just to show you how the interface works, you can, let me go back. So you can click here, create more tasks. You can connect more things to it. You can say, let's say this is a flow decision. So you can just start quickly mapping out processes here. And you can just say condition 1, condition 2, condition 3. Those conditions can be specified here. And you can use UiPath's advanced expression editor, which basically accepts C# expressions. So whether you're a programmer or you're an analyst, this interface can help you quickly map out your process. Now, once the process is mapped, you're then able to export it from here. So you can export it, download to file, which gives you a .bpmn file. And what that does is the process that we just saw earlier, like this. If obviously I'm showing you a very high level block diagram, but if you're actually looking at an invoice accounts payable process, it would have several different business flow decisions and if else or multiple choices, and all of those things need to be carefully mapped by a business analyst first before the developer can start working on the process. That is typically how automation projects are built, or any software projects are built. For example, you need to know exactly where to go, exactly all of the decisions that the code needs to make before you can start building. And that's why mapping the process out correctly is important. But in traditional projects, what happens is the business analyst finalizes the document, gets approval from the customer. Once the document is final approved, which is, let's say, PDD or solution design document after architect has gone through it, once the document is approved, then the developer starts to build. And how does the developer build? They look at the process map, and then they try to interpret how UiPath RE framework project would work, for example. So they look at one if diagram, and then they use the if block in UiPath Studio and build it from there. The difference with Maestro is once you've exported the BPMN diagram, now let's jump into Maestro quickly. So far, do we have any questions? I see some.
There are quite a number of questions, Ash.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So one would be with regard to licensing. I'm typing in the response for the licensing itself.
Yeah, I'll leave those answers to you, yes. Those questions for you. Okay, so I'll keep going while Sean types the answers. UiPath Maestro is available just like all of their other offerings. it's available under your automation cloud. So when you log into cloud.uipath.com and get yourself a free organization, you can see that it'll give you orchestrator services. You'll have access to Studio, agents, Maestro, orchestrator, all of those things. Agents we already saw last week, and to anyone who attended last week, I had said that we will basically use this agent in the next session. So I would like to show you why that agent was important for today's session. Now, as Sean mentioned earlier, we should quickly, I'm not trying to delay showing you Maestro. It looks exactly like the modeler looks, except you'll see some differences. For example, the interface here is very limited. I can at most rename my project, and that is it. It's just a mapping tool. I don't have much else to do here. Now, if you compare this to this, start modeling, let's open a new one. So if you compare this interface to the designer interface of a Maestro process, it's exactly the same, except you have all these other extra options, because now you're inside an integrated development environment. So now you're actually building a Maestro process. And what is the difference between a mapped process and a Maestro agentic process is that it's, in simple words, it's an automation workflow, or sorry, it's a process map that comes alive. So not only can you map the process in exactly the way that you just saw, but you can also connect it to live components that can help you run the process right here. So this is not just a mapping tool. This is an integrated development environment. You are a developer. Even if you're a developer, you are actually building stuff inside this. And then you can also debug it here. You can publish from here. So just like you would use UiPath Studio to build an RPA, a very complicated RPA process, for Maestro, you will be using this designer for all of the things that are required to make this a successful workflow process or agentic process. So just like I showed you in that, what I can do here is I can connect a task. Now, what is a start event? Again, if you wanted to read more about that, you can go and read here. So,
sorry, Ash.
Yes.
I've got a question. So, with the BPMN functionality, can we import and say, for example, an image or a file into UiPath? Is that possible?
Yes. So if you go to modeler, you can import, and it'll give you an option to just import a BPMN, for example. Sorry, if you PNG or JPEG of a BPMN, I think that's also acceptable. So if I did that, it will just import that, and then it'll give me that. So for example, if you have an existing BPMN somewhere else, Lucidchart or Visio, you can have it imported and go there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So, right. Now, so continuing on what's Maestro, you see here, when I select this, what I can do here is probably give it a name. So this, I could say, this is the step one, or I could call it, let's say, dispatcher, right? Which is invoice extractor. If we continue or go with this example that we saw last week, you've got the first thing, which is invoice extractor. It takes input that is an invoice that was, say, sent by a Salesforce case as an attachment, or it could be an email that came in and the robot was monitoring the email. It found the invoice and it extracted the invoice, meaning, sorry, it read the invoice from the attachments, but then before it can extract it, it has to just do some initial classification and stuff, and then send it up to the OCR solution, like document understanding, so that it can actually do the extraction part. Now, Going back to Maestro here. So if I'm mapping the process out, I can at most say that, and I can give it a description. But in an agentic process, when I'm as a developer, when I'm building this, the BA created this and gave me invoice extractor will sit here. So what do I do with this block? This is invoice extractor, but instead of just being an image, I can actually call an agent, or I can call an RPA workflow. So this is the true power of Maestro. You're actually building a workflow, but it runs right here. It's not something that you'll have to go and build somewhere else. And here I can just say use this agent, and then sorry, I'm on the wrong tenant. So this is to quickly recap what we did last week. Last week we built a live agent, and the brief that we gave autopilot, obviously, unfortunately, doesn't have the history of our conversation that we previously had. But I did not write any of this. If you recall the last week's session, or if you go and watch it on YouTube channel, I basically just use autopilot to describe what my agent should do. And then it gave me all these detailed prompts where it said, if you give it an invoice text, which could be a text that was extracted by the initial invoice extractor step, and then this agent will then be able to derive all the invoice details like invoice number, invoice date, and even line items. And all of those things will be shown here. Let me quickly check if by any chance it has test outputs from previous runs. I don't think we can do that here. Okay, so never mind. The reason I brought it up is this is an invoice solution that we built last week. We deployed it to Orchestrator. So if you recall, the finance, we deployed my invoice solution, and my invoice extractor is my agent that takes invoice text, and then it creates an output. Let me see if we have any. No, we didn't. We only ran it in debug mode. So let me go back to now Maestro. So currently we have an agent that is deployed, ready to go. Now, if I were building a new Maestro process, an agentic process, and UiPath already offers you quite a few process templates. They are still adding on, working on adding more templates, but we have invoice processing, loan processing as popular examples. So let's see what the invoice processing process looks like. Okay, I'm going to use the template. Now you'll see here the first step is about invoice extraction, I believe. While it loads, so far, I have only clicked on a default template, and I'm just waiting for it to load. It's taking much longer than needed. Okay, here we go. So that's a template that's readily available. Now I could just go and start building all of these components, and I could just leverage that ready to use process that's given to me. So invoice received, as we discussed, this is an invoice received message start. So this is the start event. Let's quickly, we will talk about it, but I just want to finish how we got here. So we talked about the invoice extractor, which is the first step here. So let's say we already have received the invoice. What do we do with the document? So we say start and wait for an agent. And then I say, go and use my invoice extractor, which is an agent that I built. And I can say, this is the invoice text. So invoice text that was extracted from step 1 could be passed in here. I could create a new variable for that. And that will then be extracted, and the output will be given in the form of invoice number, invoice date, line items as an object or array, and error, if any. So just by quickly building an agent in my agent builder, I'm able to just use this pre-made template, and I can just simply connect my agent. Now, once I connect it here, it'll ask me for the output. So I will have to make sure that my agents or my RPA workflows, they all have the right inputs and output arguments that are given from one step to another. So start message must give me the invoice text as this agent needs. The agent gives out this. So the next step must be able to accept those four pieces of output data and then do something else with it. So that is how your process would move forward, and that is what you're able to do with Maestro. Now, obviously, I don't have a really intricate actual use case of processing a lot of invoices, and it obviously needs a lot more infrastructure, and it would need a really long session to do that. So we are not going to do this. I have other. I thought we could do with some real-time data capture of sorts. So I'll need your participation. We will look at a different use case where we can see how Maestro works, and we can also potentially see how the performance can be monitored and optimized. So we will cover all those 5 things that we saw on that slide. Before I do that, any questions on what's different in Maestro? Anything that wasn't clear, or did I create more confusion? Any doubts so far?
I think it's quite clear, Ash. Most questions I've answered in the chat as well. I think they're very much interested. Like I was just sharing with Sean earlier the link to the previous session, so I pointed it on your channel, pointed it to your channel as well. But yeah, I think everyone is just quite really interested it's quite clear as well.
Right. Okay, that's really positive. So I see we are slightly more than halfway through. So last session we ran over by 5 to 10 minutes. So I want to leave for some time for questions. So I will just make one important point that is what is really, really important to understand. And I said that in the last session as well. When we use Maestro or when we start using agent, I think we almost have to unlearn in a way how RE framework has traditionally supported automation projects. So if you look at a standard UiPath RE framework based project, what you have is there is a state machine, which you have an initialization state, which only runs one. Then you have get data and process data. And they run in loop. As long as you have more data, it will keep running through the same queue. So you get data, you process data, you get data, and you process data. And when there's no more data, you end process. That's how the state machine typically runs, which means once the control comes into an RE framework based project, it only stops when there's no more data to process. As opposed to if you're looking at a Maestro process like this, each new transaction actually starts with a start event and it ends when that transaction has been completed. So essentially what you're looking at here, if I compare that to a UiPath Studio project, It's basically you're just looking at one instance of all the way from start to all the way to finish, right? Which means even if you were to rely on any RPA processes here, because you will need some kind of RPA intervention, you might need to download something from a user interface that needs to happen automatically. But all of those things will now be task based, not goals based. So we often make this distinction about agents. Agents are goals based, and RPA workflows are task based. But even in that, if I look at RE framework based projects, they're this is probably a hot take, but they're sort of goals based because their whole goal is to basically run through all of the work that's there. So they will keep doing that. So if you, let's say one system was down, and if you didn't have fail safes, and you had 100 transactions, the RE framework will just burn through all 100 items and fail on all 100, but agent won't. So it's RE framework is not exactly or not necessarily goals based, but it still does have a goal, which is it has to run through all of the data unless you tell it otherwise. We are not doing that here. So if you build an if you build an RPA workflow for a project like this in Maestro, make sure that it has a specific start and specific finish. It only goes from point A to point B. It doesn't try to control the whole conversation or control the whole operation. That's very important to understand. Now, with that in mind, I will now go to the Maestro process that I built for you. I'll move this tenant away. We're back into this agentic tenant. Now, to actually show you how all of these things can work, because agentic process also has monitoring and optimize at the end. What I did was I had to create a few different things. I hope I won't overwhelm you a lot, but I'll try to quickly cover that. So what I did was I set up an entity, which is another way of saying I set up a data table. So I set up a table called community greeter data. I built a community greeter app, which looks like just so what I'm planning to do is you will all access this app. It's a very simple app and it won't collect your private information, so don't worry about it. You just enter your name, first name is fine, and you select what type of role do you hold with your organization. And when you submit, it'll go and save that data in this app, in this data table. Now, what I built was an agentic process which waits for that event. So this is my process that I built just today to show you this in this demo. And it waits for a connector event. So we saw in the other process, we saw invoice received as the start event. Now, quickly about start events. So in start events, there are quite a few different types of start event. So there's a normal basic start event, message start event, timer. So you can have it run every hour, every minute, every day, anything like that. So in this case, it's a message start event. Similarly, here it's waiting for a connector event. That's what I configured, and it automatically changes the icon. If I remove that, it would just go blank. So let me quickly undo that. So when I select connector event, it automatically changes that to message start. Now I'm monitoring this data table for record created using this start event. And anytime someone submits a response, basically the event trigger becomes true and the entire process kicks in. Next, it retrieves the information of that person and it takes the data, which is their attendee's role and the attendee's name. Based on that, it will if the user has said they are a manager or technical or business analyst or other, it will do quite a few things. Now, you might see there are 4 blocks, but they're actually the same agent. It's the welcome agent that I've built, and we will quickly see what the agent does as well. But there are developer, analyst, and manager flow. Why I kept it simple is the reason to use Maestro is not to do a lot of different things. However, you can do that, but Maestro is to be used to make process simple. So I could either build all of that inside an agent. I could say, if the input says X, then do this, Y, then do that, and Z, then do that. And I could just tell welcome agent to do all of that. That is a very legitimate, proper way of doing that too. But to showcase what Maestro can do, we are using this. Now, this exclusive gateway is basically like an if-else, multiple if-else condition. So based on the role of the person, it will go if the role is, if you can see, let me open it here. If the person's role is technical, then it goes to sends a welcome developer sort of response. Otherwise, analyst, manager. So all of these arrows, that's where the condition is configured. So manager, it goes to manager. If it's analyst, then it goes to analyst, so on and so forth. If it is other, because I wanted to highlight that, I intentionally didn't build any it doesn't show like an extra text field for you to describe your role, because what I was trying to do there is if it's other, then we want more information from that person. So a human in the loop will be called, and then I can create an action app task, which means I would have to build a manual review task, manual review app for an internal user. For example, my organization will have a person who's in charge or who's responsible for taking input from the customer. And those sort of things can be managed also from the same. And you can see again, when I selected task here, which is of task type execute connector activity, it has an envelope. If I select create action app task, it automatically changes that. So this is nothing. I typed it in. So human in the loop is not the name of the task. That's just the label that I gave it. But the actual task that's happening is it creates a human action. That's why you see that person. Let me zoom in so you all can see. So it shows you the person. Similarly, this is the agentic task. So as you can see, that icon is kind of visible there. So you can, just by looking at the block, you can tell that this is an agent at work, or this is a human in the loop task, and so on and so forth. Now, right. Now the next part is basically blank. It just it's nothing. It's no action taken. It only says confirm subscription if it's there, if it's 3%. What I've done, it's a hypothetical scenario of someone signing up for a newsletter, and they're giving us their name and what type of role they do, and the newsletter is supposed to send them information based on their role, which is why I split it up. So to show it in action, I'll just give you all the URL. It's very easy to type, so that way we can keep it simple. So if you just go to, I'm not sure if you can see it here. I'll type it here. So if you go to this URL and just submit responses, can you please type done in chat once you've done that? Because then what I would like to show you is so we should see data coming in here. Okay, so we have one input from Sean. Once again, oh, sorry, are you not able to access that? Is anyone having issues with accessing the link?
I pasted the link, Ash.
Okay.
Please.
I should have pasted it here. Okay, thanks, Sean. Right, so let's see. We have a couple of inputs coming in. Sean, Hare Krishna, and right now. Before we see what the robot does, and once again, it's not capturing your information, so you're not going to get an email or text message or anything like that. Don't worry. This is simply just to show you what is possible. So this is like an art of the possible with Maestro. What the welcome agent does, I'll show you the definition. What I prompted the agent to do is analyze the given name. So the person will submit their information, and you can see the data manager has two things coming in: attendee name and attendee role, right? So once that information comes in, I want to analyze the given name, provide any interesting fact about the person. So let's assume I had a workflow where the person has signed up with their email address, and this is the very first email that I'm sending them. I want to make a good impression so that they would actually be interested in reading what I have to say, what my newsletter has to say on a weekly basis. So I want to make a good impression. So this is typically my style. When I'm speaking to someone, I try to understand the name of their name or meaning of their name reason. So I just model that agent behavior after what I like to do. And then I said, based on their role, then you have to craft a tailored introduction. Quickly to revisit what system prompt is and user prompt is. System prompt is like the default the purpose that we give the agent. So this is the static information that will always be true for the agent. And in user prompt, you can then say, for this very specific information, like this person and with this role, do this. So that's the general distinction between system prompt and user prompt. User prompt is more dynamic. It changes for every transaction. System prompt is typically always the same. Right. I'm keeping it short because this is not agent builder, but hopefully many of you have submitted responses by now. This agent will ideally create that kind of output for all of you. And how it does that is, now I already have I will go and show you the solution that I've deployed. So what I did simply was, in my workspace, I deployed the solution, which is it contains that agent, and I also deployed a process. So here I have the welcome agent deployed, and then the process, which is community greeter flow, which is the flow that we just saw. Now it must have been in action, and we can check that by looking here. Yeah, so we can see that welcome agent has been at work for all of these people. Let's see how many responses did we get. Oh wow, we got quite a few. That's really amazing to see. So now what I had already done was I deployed the process before starting this demo, right? So if I go into Maestro again, so at Maestro level, that home, this is where I can see my projects, and that's how I access the studio. So this is my development environment, but this is the monitoring and optimize piece that I was talking about earlier. So now you'll see that we've had 17 instances of that process run, which means we've had 17 transactions come through so far. And the monitoring and optimize parts comes into picture now. We will see the latest active version and what it has been doing, right? So we have had 17 responses so far, out of which we have seen 5 developers come through, 3 analysts and 3 managers come through. I think someone's still being processed because an agent might still be running that. And then 11 of them have been confirmed for subscription because 5 went to other and they were not accepted. I intentionally left this this thing. Let me try if I can go back to that. If you look at the definition of that Maestro process we just saw, I've basically left that block completely blank. It doesn't have any conditions, right? It's just, yeah, these are just like, they basically indicate 1 and 2, but they're not actually going anywhere. They have no input coming in. So I've basically said, sorry, just a second. Here I said denied because let's say the manual review task, the person decided that they were not a good fit for this newsletter, so they denied, or they approved. Based on their approval, they will get a confirmed subscription email and then finish. So all of that part is hypothetical once again, because we are only showcasing what can be done. But you should be able to see now that there's all of this thing happening. So this is instance management view. Now let's switch to monitoring. Now in monitoring, there's an amazing thing called heat map. So let's say this was a real process that you're monitoring. The heat map shows you where exactly your pain point is. So all of these other areas, you can see they're green, or blue, sorry, which means everything's smooth, very easy flowing, no problems whatsoever. But there are so many failures here based on the percentage of the application exceptions or some kind of business rule exceptions happening. This heat map will automatically show you right here. So now if you compare that to what we discussed in the beginning, I would have to set up, say, a Power BI dashboard or log a lot of extra information myself into an external SQL server, SSMS or a SQL database that sits outside, and then use that data to somehow showcase on, let's say, a K2 screen of like where the pain points are and all those things. Everything is now built in. It's readily available here. So we saw all those responses, and 5 of them failed here. Just by looking at this map, even without me saying anything, you probably detected right away that there was a big problem happening right here. And then over time, as you generate more and more work, you can monitor the areas that are problematic and go and improve them. And typically where you see most of the red, that is essentially an indication of your next automation. So it automatically gives you your next automation pipeline, because anything that's broken and needs a lot of manual intervention should be automated. So that's your cue to go and then focus and automate some or all of that process. Now, optimization is process mining is not enabled. So this is a whole other topic. We are not going into that, but this was just to show you how you could build a very simple Maestro process and also monitor it. And yes, it makes all of these other problems that I mentioned, it makes all of them very easy. And all of this sits within your cloud. So once again, there's very little downside in going and building your new projects into this. One thing that I didn't mention earlier, any agents that you use here. So just to review some of the options we see. So there is start and wait for agent, which is UiPath agent. But you can also start and wait for external agent, which means here you can connect agents built in Crew AI platform, your Microsoft Power Automate agents, and even Salesforce Agentforce. There's also LangChain, LangGraph agents. They are also allowed. So they're not showing here because I think this is an enterprise organization. I believe they're available to use in community or vice versa. But yeah, Maestro also supports LangChain agents as well. Similarly, you can do quite a few different things. You can start an external workflow. You can start an RPA workflow. There is something called API workflow, which has been recently released by UiPath. So if you look at, okay, sorry, I won't go into that. I just noticed the time. I want to use the rest of the time for any leftover questions.
So far, there's none. Earlier, part Parvati was asking if you can show how the faulted instance can be retried. But I understand that in this demo that you mentioned, Ash, that this is something that we didn't cater for this one. So I think that is confirmed. I mean that you managed to answer that. From my side, I just wanted to also speak about the thing that you mentioned. Like earlier, you were showing some of the actions, right? So, and this is also in relation to a question raised earlier about licensing, right? So, with Maestro itself, how you license the actual solution would be dependent on what you want to do, right? If you wanted to run agents, for example, then you might need an agent unit or a platform unit. So and UiPath has recently revamped the licensing as well. So that's why there's an or there if it's an agent unit or a platform unit. If you wanted to run robots, for example, then you would need some robots to actually run the process. And it depends on what type of robot as well. But mostly if you have like a standard unattended robot process or serverless robots, this would be different licensing as well. It would be best to speak to the sales team or the account reps that you are working with regard to the licensing. But this is just something that I want to highlight and mention. Let's open the floor for questions. If anyone wants to ask something, please feel free to unmute yourself and raise your questions. We're happy to answer those things. Meanwhile, I'll also share my screen as just to invite everyone to join our WhatsApp group. So I'll just share my screen for those who would be interested. I'll share the QR code for them to be able to actually scan the link. But yeah, please feel free to unmute yourself, guys, if there are some questions to Ash.
Yeah, I see a question from Chetan. So yes, there are some best practices recommendations from UiPath. I believe Sean, we have a PPT. Are we going to share the deck after the event? Is that something you can do from the event page?
I'll just get some clearance on that one. But then I think we should be able to, but and then afterwards we can upload it together with the recording.
Yeah. Meanwhile, just to answer that question, I will I'll share my screen once you've done that. Thanks, Sean. So to answer your questions, Chetan, there is some recommendation from UiPath. For example, what are the things that RPA workflows do better or RE framework based projects do better versus agentic automation? So there is some information on that. We'll try to compile that and maybe share it after the event somehow. I will also post a link in this chat. It's just feedback for my personal improvement on delivering these sessions and making them better for you. So if you're kind enough, can you please complete the feedback form? I can definitely use any feedback that you have from there. Thank you.
We'll sure do, Ash. Thank you. Yeah, and once again, Ash, I'd like to thank you for granting us your time to be able to see UiPath Maestro in action.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone, for joining.